The sticky afternoon heat wrapped around the veranda of Charleston's historic district, where the polished laughter of upper-crust guests rang out like off-key notes in a song meant only for a chosen few. It was the kind of gathering where linen shirts and inherited surnames meant more than real talent. In the middle of all that, Malik, a 12-year-old black boy with sharp eyes and restless fingers, stepped toward the white grand piano tucked into the corner like an art piece no one was meant to touch. He didn't hesitate or tiptoe. He moved, like he belonged there, like the piano had been calling him this whole time. He didn't know anyone was watching. His fingers hesitated just a second before drifting across the keys. A soft, unsure chord slipped out, and the air shifted. Then came a sudden laugh, loud and sharp. Graham, a boy only a few years older, smirked as if Malik had done something ridiculous. Whispers followed. Dismissive, careful laughter behind raised glasses, but Malik didn't flinch. He touched the keys again, firmer this time, and the sound that rose, full, warm, and alive, held the room in place. People stopped talking. The old piano, ignored, for years, had finally found someone who knew how to make it sing. In the days after the incident at the Charleston veranda, Malik tried to slip back into his usual routine, but something had shifted. The feel of the piano keys stayed with him, like a song stuck in his head, and the way the guests had stared, some with curiosity, others with judgment, played over in his thoughts like an unfinished tune. At school, his only escape had always been the music room. He'd sneak in during lunch, sit quietly at the old upright piano, and let his fingers wander. But now, a handwritten sign on the door said, "Practice room access limited to enrolled music students." A rule no one had ever strictly enforced before. He didn't need to ask who complained. Meanwhile, Graham was being praised everywhere. Posters with his name announced him as the featured soloist for the school's winter recital. Teachers clapped him on the back. Some even offered to help perfect his set. But behind the scenes, Graham wasn't figuring the music out on his own. Late afternoons, when the halls were quiet, he would slip Malik the sheet music and ask for advice on tricky sections, quickly, in whispers, and never where anyone might hear. Their silent tension grew thicker each day, humming in the background like a piano string just slightly off. Looking for somewhere, anywhere, he could play without being judged, Malik wandered around his neighborhood until he found a small church on the edge of North Charleston. Tucked behind a row of run-down brick stores, it didn't look like much, but the door was usually unlocked, and no one ever seemed to ask questions. Inside, in one corner, there was an old, upright piano that had clearly seen better days. The keys were sticky in places, the tone rough and uneven, but to Malik it was perfect. No rules, no watches ticking, no whispers behind his back, just him and the music. He went there most nights after dinner, letting himself get lost in the rhythms and melodies only he could hear. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the grimy stained-glass windows, Andre, an older man with a thick New Orleans accent and a past buried beneath discarded music programs, stood quietly just beyond the half-open door. He didn't make a sound. He just listened. What he heard wasn't about polished technique or perfect tempo. It was raw feeling poured into every crooked note, something real, something rare. Right then, Andre made a decision. He would teach. The boy, even if it meant pushing back against everything the world had taught him about how it should be done. Andre didn't believe in starting slow. From their first lesson in that dusty church, he handed Malik sheets filled with pieces most college students struggled to play. Each session was intense. He'd tap the bench with a cane when Malik lost focus, grumble when he missed a note, and make him repeat difficult parts over and over until his hands ached. At first, Malik wanted to quit. It felt like too much. But over time, he realized Andre wasn't trying to crush him. He was sharpening something inside him. Every mistake hit a nerve, but each correction hit deeper, carving out a sound that was entirely Malik's. Music stopped feeling distant. It became who he was. Across town, his closest friend, Camilla, a sharp, funny classmate who had always seen through the noise, started sneaking into the church during practices. She'd press record on her phone in secret, keeping her giggles. Silent behind the pews. To her, those sessions weren't messy or wrong. They were pure magic. Wanting the world to hear, she made a new social media page and posted short clips of just Malik's hands. No name, no backstory, just music. It didn't take long. People noticed. The account started gaining followers fast. Something was happening, and neither of them could see it coming. At the Whitmore residence, the whispers started slowly. Background chatter during garden brunches and piano parent meetings. The video of a pair of dark-skinned hands flying over polished white keys had made its way through the neighborhood group chats and private school circles. No one knew the player's name, but the emotion in the music cut deeper than any label or pedigree ever could. There was something haunting about it. The contrast, the white piano, the deep skin tone caught people off guard. Some were unsettled. Others couldn't stop watching. Graham saw it the moment it popped up on his phone. He didn't need a name. The way those chords were played, how the rhythm stretched and snapped, it was Malik, no doubt. But Graham said nothing. Instead of confronting it, he kept quiet, partly from pride and partly from fear. If people realized he had been leaning on Malik all along for help with those difficult pieces, what would that make him? So he buried himself in late-night practice sessions, pushing himself harder than ever. He tried, note by note, to reclaim the spotlight that never really belonged to him. But no matter how fast or clean he played, the memory of that sound, Malik's sound, lingered, growing larger than any trophy he could win. The night of the regional student showcase had finally arrived. It was one of those big events where proud parents wore suits they usually saved for weddings, and school directors handed out programs like they were tickets to the Oscars. Investors, college scouts, and local leaders filled the auditorium at Greenville Civic Hall, eager to see the best students from each private school perform. Graham was listed as the closing act, the star of the night, and the Whitmore family had spared no expense to make sure he looked the part. But just hours before he was supposed to go on, something snapped. In the dressing room, surrounded by mirrors and pressure, he broke down. His hands trembled, his jaw clenched. No words came when the coordinator tried to reassure him, just silence and panicked breathing. He couldn't do it. Not this time. Camilla, leaning against the back wall in a borrowed dress, watched the chaos unfold. She didn't waste a second. Pulling Malik aside, she whispered fiercely, "This is your shot." He was unsure, heart pounding. But then he thought of his grandmother's voice telling him music was about showing up even when you're afraid. So he walked out, sat down, and played. The room held its breath. Malik's music filled the hall like a deep breath the crowd didn't know they needed to take. It wasn't flashy, not the kind of performance built on speed or fireworks. It was honest. His fingers moved with a calm confidence, as if he were speaking through the keys, telling stories only the heart could understand. The piece was something. Andre had made him practice so many times he'd nearly grown to hate it, but now, under the lights, it came alive. When the final note hung in the air, there was a quiet pause, like everyone needed a second to catch up. And then the applause broke out. Real thunderous applause. People stood. Some wiped tears from their cheeks. And in that moment, Malik wasn't the kid who sneaked into the music room or played in shadows. He was an artist, seen for who he really was. The joy didn't last long. Catherine Whitmore, stiff and pale behind her usual polished smile, stormed onto the stage. She looked directly at Malik and said flatly, "You had no permission to be here." The room fell into a hush of disbelief. Her words felt off, cold. The crowd shifted. Someone whispered, "Really?" Another, louder, "Let the boy play." And just like that, the Whitmore grip began to slip. In the days that followed, everyone in Charleston seemed to have an opinion about Malik. Some called him a genius, others rolled their eyes and called him trouble. He overheard whispers in hallways, saw his name floating around group chats, even noticed teachers looking at him differently, some with admiration, others with uncertainty, like they weren't sure where he fit anymore. Malik tried to stay grounded, but it all felt overwhelming. The attention was like a wave he hadn't asked for, and at times he honestly wished he could shrink. So he went back to the one place that made sense, the church with the creaky floors and the out-of-tune piano. Andre was already there, sitting by the window with a notebook in his lap. He didn't mention the showcase. He just handed Malik a new piece and said, "Fame fades, work lasts." The lessons were tougher now, each one pulling more from Malik, demanding honesty both in playing and in how he carried himself. Unexpectedly, Graham started showing up again, not with his usual swagger but quieter. One day he straight up asked, "How do you play like that?" It wasn't an apology, but it was something. They sat side by side, practicing in silence. Graham never said anything in public, but Malik didn't need him to. One afternoon, while waiting for Andre to arrive, Malik struck up a conversation with Mr. Leroy, the church's janitor, who'd been around longer than anyone could remember. Between wiping down benches and refilling paper towels, Mr. Leroy leaned on his mop and told stories about old pastors, choir mishaps, and finally, the piano. "You know," he said casually, "that piano you've been pouring your heart into was a gift. Back in the 50s, it came from one of the Claibornes, Miss Eleanor Claiborne. Didn't want nobody to know, but she used to slip money to groups fighting segregation. Said she couldn't march, but she could give." Malik froze. That name hit him hard. Claiborne. As in Catherine Claiborne Whitmore, the same woman who had tried to pull him off the stage. The idea that someone from her bloodline had once quietly pushed for equality, alone, in secret, shook Malik. The piano that helped him find his voice had come from a source he would have never guessed. When word of his digging reached Catherine, she tried to shut it down, pretending it was false. But to Malik, the truth was too important to stay quiet. He sat at that same piano and began to write, chords that held pain, pride, and the echo of resistance. The Youth Talent Showcase at Lincoln Community Center was supposed to be just another step forward, but for Malik, it felt more like a step back. He chose a basic tune, one he knew by heart, easy to play, safe, no flourishes, no surprises. Just clean notes strung together without feeling. He was determined not to stir up more attention after everything that had happened with the Whitmores and the whispers still lingering at school. He thought if he kept things simple, no one would talk. And he was right, except they didn't clap much either. The room stayed quiet after he finished, polite but cold. The judges barely looked up from their clipboards. Andre, arms crossed in the back, didn't even wait until they got home. Outside, by the parking lot, he turned to Malik and said, flat out, "If you're just gonna play scared, I'm wasting my time. I don't teach robots." The words stung more than Malik expected. He knew Andre was right, but it cut deep. At the same time, his grandmother May had grown weaker. She could no longer get out much, not even for rehearsals. And without her steady encouragement, Malik felt lost, like he was walking a tightrope with no one below to catch him. Word spread fast around Charleston High when Graham suddenly started telling people the anonymous videos floating online, recordings of Malik playing in the church and speaking about race and identity, had been his doing. He claimed he'd helped direct them, shape the message, even shoot a few of them. At first, people believed him. After all, Graham had always been the golden boy, confident, good-looking, well-spoken, but things began to unravel when his own. Parents showed up at Camilla's doorstep, demanding she take the videos down. They said the content was misleading and damaging to their son's future. Camilla didn't back down. She just crossed her arms and asked, "How can truth be damaging unless you have something to hide?" Malik found himself caught in the middle again, torn in two directions. He could stay loyal to Camilla, the one person who'd believed in him from the beginning and risked everything to share his story. Or he could take the offer on his desk from Catherine Whitmore, a full scholarship to a top music academy, but it came with strings. He'd have to sign away creative control, avoid controversial topics, and pretty much stop being himself. No choice felt right, but doing nothing, that felt worse. Malik sat with the scholarship letter in his hands for what felt like hours. The offer was real. Tuition, housing, even a stipend. It was everything most kids from his side of Charleston could only dream about. But the fine print hit like a punch. He'd have to stay quiet. No political pieces, no personal stories in public performances. Just play what's safe and smile when told. He folded the letter slowly, stood up and walked out of Catherine Whitmore's office without saying a word. Later, he sent a short email. "Thank you, but I can't accept." That was it. When he told Camilla, she teared up. "I'll help you find another way," she said, holding her phone up already, scrolling through programs, grants, anything that didn't come with a price tag on his voice. Malik didn't know how they'd make it work, but hearing her say "we" gave him some hope. Meanwhile, across town, Graham finally cracked. At dinner, with his parents silent and tense around the table, he looked his mother in the eye and said, "I'm done being your trophy. I'm not playing anymore." The words dropped like a stone. The room froze, and just like that, the Claiborne name stopped meaning what it used to. A few weeks later, Malik got an unexpected email from the Charleston Diversity Festival organizers. They had seen a clip of him online, one of the ones Camilla kept floating around, and asked if he'd perform at the final night of the event. It would be outdoors at Marion Square, with local vendors, music, and thousands of people filling the park by sundown. The catch? The festival performance fell on the same evening as the deadline to accept Catherine Whitmore's scholarship. No second chances, no extra time, pick one. Andre didn't tell him what to do, neither did Camilla. Even May, who was now mostly resting, just said, "Play where your truth lives." That was enough. So on a warm Saturday evening, as the smell of fried catfish and spicy jambalaya floated through the crowd and a high school drumline wrapped up its set, Malik sat behind an old, upright piano on a small stage and took a breath. He played a piece he'd been writing in bits and pieces, drawing from everything: anger, confusion, love, pride. The music didn't ask permission, it just told the truth. People stood still. Some clapped before it ended. A few wiped their eyes. And Malik, for once, wasn't afraid to be seen. By the next morning, clips of Malik's performance were all over social media. People who had never heard his name were tagging, sharing, and commenting like wildfire. One video, shaky but clear, showed him in mid-song, eyes closed, fingers dancing across the keys like he was letting something spill out that couldn't be said any other way. The caption read, "This is what real sounds like." A week later, a letter came in the mail. It was from the Horizon Arts Foundation out of New York. They supported young, unknown musicians from underrepresented communities. The letter said Malik had been selected for their national program, full scholarship, mentorships, concerts, everything. But there was one thing he had to do first. He had to go public. He had to stand in front of a camera or crowd and say, "Yes, that was me. I played it, I lived it, I meant every note." No hiding behind anonymous videos or half-truths. And the thought of doing that made Malik's chest tighten. He knew It could reopen wounds, bring back the judgment, maybe even more trouble for Camilla or Andre. But this time he also knew something else. Carrying the truth was hard, but burying it had nearly broken him. Malik returned to Mother Emanuel on a quiet Thursday afternoon, a place that had always felt both sacred and safe. The old piano sat quietly near the altar, its wood worn smooth from decades of hands, finding comfort in its keys. He sat down but didn't play. His hands hovered, unsure. That's when Andre walked in. No lecture, no harsh tone, just a nod, as he sat in the front pew. For a long moment they didn't say anything. Then Andre finally spoke, softer than before. "Real talent," he said, "isn't about impressing anyone. It's about becoming someone you can live with, even when no one's clapping." Malik looked down at his hands, then back up, blinking fast. Something inside him shifted. That night, back at home, he set up his phone and hit record. No filters, no script, just him. He introduced himself, talked about the videos, about the lies and the choices, and about the music that helped him survive when everything else felt like too much. He posted it before he could change his mind. In hours, comments poured in, some angry, some grateful, a few confused, but this time it didn't shake him, because now Charleston was finally listening, and they were talking out loud. When Catherine saw Malik's video go viral, she moved fast. Within 2 days, a polished statement appeared on her foundation's website praising his raw brilliance and calling him a shining example of Charleston's potential. She even reached out to offer her public support, framing it like she'd always believed in him. But people weren't buying it anymore. The timing felt off, strategic, not sincere. For years her name had been tied to exclusivity and control, and now the city was finally connecting the dots. What had once been seen as guidance started to look like gatekeeping. It didn't help that the Claiborne's old baby grand, still sitting on their wide porch, had become a strange kind of symbol. Some said it represented tradition. Others saw it as a reminder of all the voices that had been kept outside. Malik didn't wait around for debates. With help from Harmony Roots, a local arts nonprofit, he pulled together something new. They called it the Charleston Commons Concert. Dozens of kids, black, white, Latino, Asian, all lined the stage in the public square, performing everything from gospel to jazz to classical interpretations of Kendrick Lamar. The crowd was huge. The message was simple. Music, like stories, belonged to everyone, and this time nobody was left outside. Graham had stepped away from the spotlight, completely, since that dinner with his family. No interviews, no competitions, no glossy charity events with grand pianos front and center. For months, he kept to himself in his small apartment near the College of Charleston, where a second-hand keyboard sat by the window. He started playing again, slowly. Some days it was just scales, other days old pieces his fingers remembered on their own. But for the first time there was no pressure, no judging eyes, just him and the keys. One afternoon, after watching Malik's community concert on a live stream, he opened his messages and typed a short note. "Didn't think I needed music. Turns out I just needed to play it for the right reasons. Thanks." He hesitated, then hit send. Malik saw the message and smiled. A few minutes later he replied, "Next year's Commons concert. Want to play something with me?" There was no answer right away, and that was fine. Malik knew how to wait. Something had shifted between them. What used to be cold silence had turned into quiet understanding. No one said it out loud, but it was there now, a kind of respect that didn't need more than a few honest words. One evening, not long after the community concert, Malik stayed behind at Mother Emanuel to help Andre close up. The church was quiet, doors locked, lights low. Andre sat beside him near the old piano, fingers tracing the edge of the bench. After a pause, he said, I never told you why I stopped playing in public. Malik didn't push, just waited. Back in the 70s, I turned down a performance, big one, National Symphony, national broadcast. But the concert was funded by a regime overseas, one that jailed artists like me back home. I refused. They blacklisted me. My name disappeared from programs overnight. His voice cracked a little, but he didn't stop. For years, I wondered if I should have just played along. Maybe I could have helped more from the inside. But watching you stand up, watching this city listen, I think maybe I've been waiting to see someone do what I couldn't. Not long after, on a cool autumn night, Andre and Malik sat side by side at the church piano. May, thinner now, and, wrapped in a soft shawl, sat in the front row, smiling faintly. As they played together, the music filled the old wooden arches like something finally being released. Andre closed his eyes, peaceful. May passed just 3 weeks later. Malik had gone to visit, not knowing it would be the last time. She was tired, but still smiling, clutching his hand with more warmth than strength. Afterward, the house felt quieter in a way that settled deep, like something inside the walls had gone still. Malik poured his grief and gratitude into a new piece. He called it Silenced Voices. It wasn't just for May, though she was the heart of it. The music wove together gospel roots, steady jazz rhythms, and long stretches of free improvisation, meant to feel like stories pouring out after years of being held in. It was for everyone who had paved a way without asking for credit, who stood back so others could step forward. The piece premiered at the newly renovated Gaillard Center in downtown Charleston. For decades, that stage had belonged to the city's most privileged families, the sons and daughters who had lessons, names, and money behind them. That night, Malik stood there alone. The lights were bright, warm. He closed his eyes, inhaled slowly, and placed his hands on the keys. For the first time, he didn't feel like a visitor in someone else's story. He was part of it now. After the concert, things moved fast. Malik's performance wasn't just another viral moment. It sparked something bigger. News outlets picked up the story, but they didn't frame it as some clean-cut rise from the bottom tale. This was different. Reporters and podcasters talked about what his journey said about Charleston, about who gets a stage and who doesn't. It wasn't just about talent. It was about access, legacy, and the stuff most folks avoid bringing up at brunch. Soon, people in town started asking harder questions. Parents at private schools showed up at city meetings. Local artists shared their stories. The melody Malik played that night echoed beyond the theater into conversations people hadn't been willing to have before. No, he didn't sweep every award that season. And no, centuries of injustice didn't vanish because one young man told his story and played his heart out. But Malik earned something deeper. He earned the space to be heard, just as he was. No mask, no code switching, no need to ask permission. The piano, once a symbol of who belonged and who didn't, now stood as a bridge between old Charleston and what it might become. And every time Malik played, that bridge grew stronger, note by note.